My name is Evelyn, and I was 68 when my own daughter broke my heart in a way I never thought possible. She asked me to hide who I was, to pretend I wasn't her mom, just to make her fancy new life look perfect. It felt like a knife twisting in my chest, like everything I'd done for her meant nothing. Would I let her push me away, or would I find a way to stand up for myself? The pain was heavy, but a spark of strength was growing inside me. Will I get my revenge? Tell me what you think, and let me know where you're reading from. Let's dive into this story together. I was 68 years old when my world turned upside down. I'd spent my whole life working hard, raising my daughter Sarah with every ounce of love I had. Her dad passed away when she was only 5, leaving me to be both mom and dad. I worked long hours at a small bakery in our little town, waking up before the sun to knead dough and frost cakes. My hands would ache and my back would hurt, but I didn't care. Every penny I earned went to Sarah, her school supplies, her soccer uniforms, her dream of going to college. I wasn't rich, but I saved carefully, and over the years I bought a cozy house with a small garden where I grew red and pink roses. Those roses were my pride, bright and strong, just like I tried to be for Sarah. Sarah was my everything. When she smiled, it was like the sun coming out after a rainy day. Even when she grew up and moved away, I thought we'd always be close. She was 32 now, married to a man named Mark, a lawyer with a big house and shiny cars. They lived in a fancy neighborhood where the lawns were perfect, and everyone wore clothes that cost more than my monthly bills. I didn't fit in with my simple cotton dresses and gray hair tied in a messy bun. My shoes were worn, and my hands were rough from years of work, but I didn't mind. I loved visiting Sarah, seeing her laugh, even if Mark sometimes looked at me like I was out of place. That morning my phone rang while I was watering my roses. It was Sarah, her voice quick and nervous. "Mom," she said, "can you come to our house tonight? We're having a big party for Mark's boss. It's really important." My heart lifted. A party. I hadn't been to one in years, and I was excited to see Sarah's world. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "I'll be there." I spent the afternoon getting ready. I pulled out my best dress, a soft blue one I'd worn to Sarah's wedding. It wasn't fancy, but it made me feel good. I brushed my hair, put on a little lipstick and smiled at myself in the mirror. I was proud of who I was, a mom who'd given everything for her daughter. When I got to Sarah's house, the driveway was full of sleek cars, and the windows glowed with warm light. I could hear music and laughter from inside. I knocked, and Sarah opened the door, looking beautiful in a sparkly dress, but her face wasn't happy. She glanced around like she was checking if anyone saw me, and pulled me into the kitchen. The room smelled like flowers and fancy food, but Sarah's hands were shaking as she closed the door behind us. "Mom," she whispered, her eyes not meeting mine, "can you say you're my aunt tonight, not my mom?" I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It was like the floor dropped out from under me. "What?" I asked, my voice small. Sarah's cheeks turned red. "It's just, Mark's boss is here, and his family is really fancy. They might think it's weird that my mom is, not like them." Her words hit me like a slap. Not like them? I was her mother. I'd raised her, loved her, sacrificed everything for her, and now she was ashamed of me. My heart felt like it was cracking, but I didn't want to make a scene. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Okay, Sarah," I said, "I'll be your aunt." She let out a breath, like she was relieved, and handed me a tray of drinks. "Thanks, Mom. I mean Aunt Evelyn. Can you take these out to the guests?" I nodded, my hands trembling as I carried the tray into the living room. The party was full of people in suits and dresses, laughing and talking about things like vacations and golf. I moved through the crowd, offering drinks, smiling when they thanked the help. No one knew I was Sarah's mom. No one knew I'd given up my dreams so she could have hers. Sarah stayed across the room, laughing with Mark and his boss. She didn't look at me once. Mark glanced my way, his eyes cold like I was a stranger who didn't belong. I felt invisible, like I was a ghost in my own daughter's life. The tray felt heavier with every step, and my chest ached with a pain I couldn't name. I wanted to cry, to run out of that fancy house and never come back, but I stayed, serving drinks, pretending to be someone I wasn't, because Sarah asked me to. When the party ended, I drove home in the dark, my hands tight on the steering wheel. Tears ran down my cheeks, hot and silent. I kept hearing Sarah's voice, "Say you're my aunt." It wasn't just words, it was betrayal. She'd chosen her new life, her fancy husband over me. I pulled into my driveway, my little house quiet and dark. The roses looked pale in the moonlight, like they felt my sadness. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the walls covered with photos of Sarah, her first bike, her graduation, her wedding. I'd given her everything, and she'd asked me to erase myself. But as I sat there, something else stirred inside me. It was small at first, like a tiny flame. I was hurt, yes, but I was also angry. I'd worked too hard, loved too much, to let my daughter make me feel small. I wasn't just a mom who could be pushed aside. I was Evelyn, a woman who'd built a life from nothing, who'd kept going even when things got hard. That night, as I went to bed, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't sure what I'd do yet, but I wouldn't let this betrayal define me. I was going to find a way to stand tall again. The days after Sarah's party felt like a bad dream. I woke up every morning hoping it wasn't real, but her words kept echoing in my head. Say you're my aunt. It was like a splinter in my heart, sharp and impossible to ignore. I was 68, and I'd spent my life building a home for my daughter, giving her all my love. Now she was pushing me away, and the pain was heavier than anything I'd ever felt. But that spark of defiance from that night was still there, growing a little brighter each day. I wasn't ready to give up on myself, not yet. I tried to keep busy. I tended my roses, their red and pink petals soft under my fingers. I swept the porch of my little house, the one I'd worked so hard to buy. I even baked cookies, the kind Sarah used to love, hoping the smell would make me feel better. But nothing could fill the hole in my chest. Every time I passed the photos on my walls, Sarah as a baby, Sarah at her school play, Sarah in her wedding dress, my eyes stung with tears. How could my girl, my only child, be ashamed of me? I decided to call her. Maybe she didn't mean it. Maybe she'd say sorry, and we could go back to how things were. I sat at my kitchen table, the phone cold in my hand, and dialed her number. "Hi Sarah," I said when she answered, trying to sound cheerful. "I've been thinking about the party. What you asked, it really hurt me." There was a long pause, then Sarah sighed, like I was bothering her. "Mom, you're making this a big deal. It was just one night. Mark's boss thought everything was perfect, and that's important for us. Can't you understand?" Her words were like a punch. She didn't care how I felt. She only cared about her fancy life with Mark, her big house, and her new friends who wore shiny jewelry. "Sarah," I said, my voice shaking, "I'm your mom. I raised you. Doesn't that mean anything?" She got quiet again, then said, "Of course it does, but things are different now. I'll call you later, okay?" She hung up before I could say more. I sat there staring at the phone, feeling like I'd lost her all over again. Things got worse after that. Sarah stopped inviting me to her house. I used to visit every month, bringing her favorite apple pie, or just sitting on her couch, talking about old times. But now when I texted to ask if I could come over, she'd reply with short messages. "We're busy, Mom. Maybe next month." But next month never came. I waited hoping she'd call, but my phone stayed quiet. It was like I was fading from her life, like a picture left in the sun too long. One Saturday, I couldn't take it anymore. I baked an apple pie, the kind Sarah loved since she was little, with cinnamon and a flaky crust. I thought if I surprised her she'd remember how close we used to be. I drove to her house, the pie warm in a dish on the passenger seat. The neighborhood was so fancy, with tall gates and perfect flowers. I felt out of place in my old car, but I didn't care. I just wanted to see my daughter. When I knocked on the door, Mark answered. His face tightened like he wasn't happy to see me. "Evelyn," he said, not even calling me Mom, "this isn't a good time. We're having people over." I peeked past him and saw Sarah in the living room, laughing with a group of strangers in fancy clothes. She looked so happy, but when she saw me, her smile faded. She didn't wave or call me in. She just stood there, holding a glass of something sparkly. "Maybe call next time," Mark said, his voice cold. He closed the door, leaving me on the porch with the pie in my hands. I stood there, my heart pounding. The pie felt heavy, like it was made of all my hurt. I wanted to knock again, to shout, "I'm your mother, Sarah." But I didn't. I walked back to my car, my cheeks burning with shame. I drove home, the pie untouched, and set it on my kitchen counter. I couldn't eat it. It just sat there, reminding me of how Sarah had shut me out. That night, I sat in my living room, the house quiet except for the tick of the clock. I looked at my roses through the window, their petals glowing in the moonlight. I thought about my life, how I'd worked at the bakery for years, saving every dime for Sarah. I thought about my house, my savings, everything I'd planned to leave to her in my will. Why should I give it to someone who didn't want me in her life? Someone who made me feel like I wasn't good enough. The spark of defiance grew stronger, like a fire catching dry wood. I wasn't just sad anymore, I was angry. Sarah and Mark were building their perfect world, but they were leaving me behind. I wasn't going to beg for their love. I was Evelyn, a woman who'd raised a daughter alone, who'd bought a house with her own hands, who'd kept going no matter what. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let them make me feel small anymore. I went to bed that night with a new feeling in my chest. Not just hurt, but strength. I was ready to take back my life. The hurt from Sarah shutting me out didn't go away, but something new was growing inside me. I was 68, and I'd spent my life giving everything to my daughter, only to have her push me away like I didn't matter. That moment on her porch, holding the apple pie while Mark closed the door in my face, changed me. I wasn't just sad anymore, I was ready to take back my life. The spark of defiance in my heart was now a steady flame, and I knew I had to do something big to show I was still strong, still Evelyn. For days I thought about what Sarah had done, asking me to pretend I wasn't her mom, ignoring my calls, treating me like a stranger. Every time I looked at my roses, their bright petals standing tall in the garden, I felt a little braver. I'd worked hard for everything I had, my cozy house, my savings, my little life. I'd always planned to leave it all to Sarah in my will. It was what moms did, right? But why should I give it to someone who didn't respect me? Someone who acted like I was something to hide. One morning I woke up with a clear idea. The sun was shining through my kitchen window, and I felt strong, like I'd finally found my footing. I picked up the phone and called my friend Clara, who worked at the bank. "Clara," I said, my voice steady, "I need to change my will. Can you help me?" Clara was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure, Evelyn? That's a big step." I told her about the party, about Sarah's coldness, about the pie and the closed door. Clara listened, then said, "Okay, I know a lawyer, let's set up a meeting." The next day I drove to a small office downtown. My hands were sweaty as I parked my old car, but I wasn't nervous, I was determined. Mr. Thompson, the lawyer, was a kind man with round glasses and a warm smile. He offered me a cup of tea and asked me to sit in a soft chair. "Evelyn," he said, "what do you want to do with your money and house?" I took a deep breath, my heart beating fast but sure. "I want to leave everything to a charity," I said, "one that helps single moms like I was when Sarah was little." Mr. Thompson raised his eyebrows. "Everything? What about your daughter?" I looked at my hands, rough from years of kneading dough at the bakery. Then I told him everything, how Sarah asked me to lie about being her mom, how she stopped inviting me over, how Mark shut the door in my face. My voice shook a little, but I didn't cry. I was done crying. Mr. Thompson nodded, his face serious. "This is your choice, Evelyn. If this is what you want, I'll make it happen." Over the next week we worked on the new will. I went to Mr. Thompson's office twice, signing papers and talking about details. I chose a charity called Hope for Moms, which helps single mothers pay for food, rent, and school supplies. I liked the idea of my money helping women who were struggling, just like I had when Sarah was small. Every time I signed a paper I felt lighter, like I was letting go of the hurt Sarah had caused. I was taking back my power piece by piece. I didn't tell Sarah about the will. I wasn't ready for her to know, and honestly I didn't think she'd care. She was too busy with her fancy life, her parties, and her husband who looked at me like I was nothing. But I started doing something else that made me happy. I called Hope for Moms and asked if I could volunteer. They were thrilled. The next Saturday I went to their community center, a small building with colorful walls and a big kitchen. I met women who reminded me of myself, tired but strong, doing their best for their kids. I helped in the kitchen, teaching the moms how to bake simple bread and cookies. We laughed as flour dusted our aprons, and their kids ran around giggling. One mom named Maria told me her story. She was raising 2 boys alone, working 2 jobs. "You're so kind, Miss Evelyn," she said, smiling. Her words warmed my heart like sunlight after a long winter. For the first time in months I felt like I mattered. Meanwhile Sarah called me one day out of the blue. I was in my garden, pruning my roses, when my phone buzzed. "Mom," she said, her voice rushed, "can you babysit next weekend? Mark and I are going to a fancy dinner with his boss." I paused, my janda in hand. In the past I'd have said yes right away, happy to help, but not this time. "I'm busy," I said calmly. "I'm volunteering at a charity." Sarah sounded shocked. "Volunteering? Since when?" I didn't explain. "I have to go, Sarah," I said, and hung up. I stood in my garden, the roses bright around me. Saying no to Sarah felt strange but good. I wasn't her servant, there to jump when she needed me. I was Evelyn, a woman with her own life, her own strength. Changing my will and volunteering were just the start. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing. I was done letting Sarah and Mark make me feel small. My heart still ached for the daughter I'd lost, but I was finding a new kind of peace, one that didn't depend on her. The weeks after I changed my will were different. I was 68, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was standing tall. My heart still hurt when I thought of Sarah, but volunteering at Hope for Moms gave me a new purpose. I spent my days helping single moms, laughing with them in the kitchen, and watching their kids play. It was like finding a new family, one that valued me for who I was. But deep down, I knew Sarah and I weren't done. I had a feeling the truth about my will would come out, and when it did, things would change again. One chilly afternoon I was in my garden, trimming my roses. The air smelled like fall, crisp and clean, and my hands were busy with the clippers. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I saw Sarah's name on the screen. My stomach tightened. She hadn't called since I told her I was too busy to babysit. "Mom," she said, her voice sharp, "we need to talk. Can you come to dinner tonight? Just you, me, and Mark." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep my distance from the hurt. But another part was curious. Did she want to fix things? Okay, I said. I'll be there. I put on my blue dress, the one from the party, and drove to Sarah's house. The fancy neighborhood looked the same. Perfect lawns, big houses, cars that sparkled in the streetlights. When I knocked, Sarah opened the door. She looked nervous, her hands twisting together. Mark was behind her, his face serious. They led me to their dining room, where a table was set with plates and glasses, but no food yet. It didn't feel like a friendly dinner, it felt like a meeting. We sat down and Mark spoke first. Evelyn, he said, his voice cold like always. We heard you changed your will, is that true? My heart skipped a beat. How did they know? Maybe Clara, my friend from the bank, had let it slip by accident. Or maybe someone at the charity had talked. I took a deep breath, keeping my face calm. Yes, I said, I did. Sarah's eyes went wide, and her face turned red. Mom, how could you? That money, that house, it's supposed to be mine. We're family. Her words stung, but I didn't flinch. I looked at her, my daughter who used to hold my hand when she was scared, who used to eat my apple pie and tell me she loved me. Now she was shouting, acting like my money was hers to claim. Sarah, I said, my voice steady, family doesn't ask you to pretend you're not their mom. Family doesn't shut the door in your face when you bring them a pie. You made me feel like I didn't matter, so I decided my money should go to people who need it. Single moms who are struggling, like I was. Mark leaned forward, his eyes narrow. You're being unfair, Evelyn. Sarah's your daughter. She deserves that inheritance. I looked at him, at the man who never called me mom, who treated me like I was less than him. Deserves? I said. I worked for every penny, Mark. I needed dough until my hands hurt. I raised Sarah alone, and you both decided I wasn't good enough for your fancy life. I'm choosing to help people who respect what I've been through. Sarah started to cry, her hands covering her face. Mom, I didn't mean to hurt you, she said, her voice shaky. The party was just one night. I was trying to make things easier for Mark. I shook my head. It wasn't just one night, Sarah. It was every time you didn't call, every time you pushed me away, every time you chose your new life over me. My voice was calm, but inside my heart was breaking all over again. I wanted to hug her, to tell her it was okay, but I couldn't. Not yet. Mark stood up, his chair scraping the floor. This is ridiculous, he said. You're punishing us for living our lives. You can't just give everything away like that. I stood up too, my hands steady. It's my money, my house, my choice, I said. You both made me feel like I didn't belong in your world. So I made a new plan, one where I matter. I looked at Sarah, hoping she'd say something, anything to show she understood. But she just cried, her head down. I picked up my purse and walked to the door. I love you, Sarah, I said, my voice soft but firm. But love doesn't mean letting you hurt me. I stepped outside, the cool night air hitting my face. As I drove home, my heart was heavy, but I felt free too. I'd told the truth, stood up for myself. The roses in my garden were waiting for me, and so was my new life at Hope for Moms. I didn't need Sarah's approval to be Evelyn, the woman who'd built a life from nothing. When I got home, I sat in my kitchen, the house quiet around me. I thought about Sarah's tears, Mark's anger. Part of me wondered if I'd been too harsh, but then I remembered the party, the pie, the closed door. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was choosing myself, and it felt right. After that dinner with Sarah and Mark, where I told them about my new will, everything changed. I was 68, and I'd faced my daughter's anger, her tears, and her husband's cold words. Walking out of their fancy house that night, I felt a mix of sadness and strength. My heart still ached for Sarah, the little girl who used to hold my hand, but I knew I'd done the right thing. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was Evelyn, a woman who'd built a life, and wasn't afraid to stand up for herself. The question now was, what came next? The days after the dinner were quiet. Sarah didn't call, and I didn't reach out either. It hurt, like a bruise that throbbed when I thought about her, but I didn't let it stop me. I kept volunteering at Hope for Moms, the charity I'd chosen for my will. Every Saturday I went to their community center, where the walls were painted bright yellow, and the kitchen smelled like bread. I taught single moms how to bake cookies, or stretch $1 for groceries. Their kids ran around laughing, and called me Miss Evelyn. Their smiles made me feel warm inside, like I was part of something good. One mom, Maria, became a friend. She had 2 boys full of energy, and she worked long hours at a diner. One day as we kneaded dough together, she said, Miss Evelyn, you're so strong. I want to be like you someday. I smiled, but my eyes stung. Strong? I didn't always feel that way, but hearing her say it made me believe it a little more. I told her about my roses, how they kept growing even when the weather was tough. You're like those roses, I said, you bend but you don't break. She hugged me, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. Back home, my little house was my safe place. I spent evenings in my garden, the roses bright under the stars. I'd sit on my porch with a cup of tea, listening to crickets. The photos of Sarah on my walls still hurt to look at, but I didn't take them down. They were part of my story, even if it wasn't the one I'd hoped for. I thought about my will, how I'd left everything to hope for moms. It felt right, like my hard work would live on, helping women who needed it most. Then one morning, a letter arrived. I was watering my roses when the mailman handed it to me. The handwriting was Sarah's, neat and familiar. My hands shook as I opened it. The letter was short, but every word hit me hard. Mom, it said, I'm sorry. I was wrong to ask you to pretend you weren't my mom. I was wrong to push you away. I miss you. Can we talk? I read it again, then sat on my porch, the letter in my lap. Part of me wanted to run to her, to hug my daughter and forget the pain, but another part, the part that had grown stronger, wasn't ready to trust her yet. I thought about everything, her words at the party, the closed door, her anger when she learned about the will. An apology was a start, but words weren't enough. I needed to see respect, not just hear it. I decided to meet her, but I wasn't gonna change my will. Not now. If Sarah wanted to be my daughter again, she'd have to show me she meant it, not just expect me to give in. The next day I called her. Sarah, I said, I got your letter. I'm willing to talk, but things aren't the same. Let's meet at the park tomorrow. She sounded relieved, her voice soft. Okay, Mom, I'll be there. When I hung up, I felt calm, like I was in control. The park was neutral, not her fancy house or my little one. It was a place where we could be honest. At the park, I sat on a bench under a big oak tree. Sarah arrived, looking nervous in a simple sweater, not her usual sparkly dresses. She sat next to me, her hands folded tight. Mom, she said, I'm so sorry. I got caught up in Mark's world, trying to fit in. I didn't mean to hurt you. I looked at her, my heart softening but still cautious. Sarah, I said, you made me feel like I wasn't good enough. That's not what family does. I love you, but I need to know you respect me. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I do, Mom. I want to try again. I didn't promise anything, but I said we could talk more. Take it slow. As she left, I felt a small hope, like a new rosebud in my garden. Maybe we could rebuild, but it would take time. Back home, I sat in my garden, the roses glowing in the sunset. I was 68, and I'd been through so much, losing Sarah's dad, raising her alone, facing her betrayal, but I'd found my strength. I wasn't just a mom who'd been hurt. I was Evelyn, a woman who helped others, who grew roses, who stood tall. My will stayed as it was, for now, because it wasn't about punishing Sarah, it was about choosing myself. As I sipped my tea, I smiled. The future was uncertain, but I was ready for it. My roses would keep blooming, and so would I.